Well, hello and welcome to another edition of What's My Story. I'm Napoleon Bell and I'm your host today, and we have another interesting story to have and to convey to all the viewing audience out there, and we're excited about this one because it is this gentleman has a really impactful story and a very inspirational story, and I know that after you hear him for a while, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So without further ado, I want to bring on Kyle Overmyer. He is an amazing person. He's his nonprofit is KO Addiction, but also he's a regional director of Hickory Behavioral Hospital. So welcome, Kyle.
Thank you very much, Napoleon. It's an honor and a pleasure here to be with you on my story.
Yeah, I'm real excited. It's interesting, how we met. I saw you on Facebook. You saw me on Facebook, and then we were at Obie Stillwell's
Yes,
um,
yes.
uh, event, and actually got to meet each other. And so I've always been interested in your story, and it was fate, I say, that we were supposed to meet at that time, and here we are, right? And so let's just get started. I want to, let's start from the beginning. Like with many of the people that I talk to, it's real interesting to hear their story, but hear where they started, right? And so tell us a little bit about you. Were you born in Columbus, Ohio, and how did it all start?
No, actually, I'm a transplant, as I say, to Columbus area. I'm originally from Fremont, Ohio. That's Sandusky County, Northwest Ohio, up
Okay.
Lake Erie. Um, Born and raised in that area and lived most of my life from childhood all the way through. Um, Went to high school up there, went to Fremont St. Joseph Central Catholic. My parents sent me through a Catholic school. Um, my father and mother, they're still married after 50 plus years.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Actually spoke to him today. I speak to him every day.
Good.
No, great childhood, played high school sports, football, wrestled, and I was a boxer at a local gym as well.
Oh wow. So you had a really good upbringing, and it sounds like, and played sports and good schooling, and so it sounds like everything was going really well for you.
I did. I had actually a picture perfect childhood. My father was he's retired now from Sandusky County Sheriff's Office as a captain, about 38 years, and my mother worked at a prominent local uh, construction company there in
Mhm.
Ohio.
Oh wow. Okay. So after high school, did you move on to college, or what was your ambition? Leaving high school.
I did. Actually, when I started my journey into college, I graduated in 1992 and headed off the University of Toledo. Believe it or not, I was an art major. I like to paint and draw as well.
Okay.
And only spent 2 years and decided I dropped out. I didn't know what I was going to do or who I was going to be. And there was really no, when you see a lot of artists, there's not a whole lot of money and finance, so stability in it. So
Hmm.
back and started working in odd jobs in factories. And, I was even a personal trainer at a local gym. I was really into working out. And,
Okay.
um, but
Looks like you still are into working out.
I do. I'm still, yes, it's
Very good.
pretty important to me. So, um, yeah, and then I decided I spoke to my father and said, I kind of want to get into law enforcement. You were provided a great, upbringing, put a roof over our head and put food on our plate, and, sent me through a good education at, a Catholic school. And he said, don't do it. He said,
Oh well.
no. And I didn't listen to him.
Hmm.
I did not listen. So I went off to the police academy, put enough money together, and went through the police academy.
Oh wow. So where did you join? Which department did you join?
I went through I was sponsored by Sandusky County Sheriff's Office,
Okay.
and I went through Terra State Community College and went through there. They had a police academy held there. I went there and graduated in 1995. And in 1996, I was hired at the Sandusky County Sheriff's Office in the Corrections Division, is where I began my journey in law enforcement.
Oh wow. So how was that? How did the in law enforcement, how did that impact you, and and going forward, and you're where you are today? I mean, well, tell me a little bit. So how long were you with the sheriff's office?
Well, I was in corrections for a little over like 3.5 years,
Okay.
and I went back to college, obtained my associate's degree in criminal justice.
Okay.
Married my first wife then, and who was Melanie, and we had our first child, my daughter Michaela, and I got really into law enforcement and put my whole heart and soul. Where after even getting my associate's degree, I went back to Tiffin University and obtained my bachelor's degree in business administration.
Okay.
So my plans were not to stay there, but I was then promoted to the road patrol, and I started to interview on the federal level. And then the sheriff got wind of it, and he didn't want me to leave. So it was getting ready to have my second child, my son Dylan, and he called me out of the blue one day and said, Kyle, I'd like to meet with you. And I thought, man, I in trouble. The sheriff don't usually ever call one of the road deputies.
Right.
So we had a lunch, and he said, I'll tell you what, you have a knack for drug interdiction, and you do a great job, and I'd hate to lose you. And he said, I would like to make you a detective. And I said, well, I'm still thinking about going to the federal level. He goes, what if I make you a detective sergeant? And I was only 27 years old then.
Okay.
So I went home, talked it over with my wife then, and I stayed at the sheriff's office and became I handled a lot of homicides, burglaries, theft ring. I even went to the point where I worked undercover in a theft ring and began to steal things along with some of the organization even. But I still continue to gravitate towards the narcotics investigation, because for my knack on the streets, taking off drugs, guns, and taking down some of the big drug dealers when I was even a road patrol officer.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you progressed through the sheriff's office. Where did you end up in the sheriff's office?
Well, even from there, within a year, he promoted me to be a captain, because and that was when I was 28 years old. And there we were starting to pick off a lot of large amounts of cocaine, which we then worked with BCI and also DEA, where I started to work a little undercover as well with DEA, purchasing large quantities of cocaine then with DEA and BCI as well. So I, for the capacity for about 3 years, working hand in hand with those organizations.
Okay. Now, did you eventually decide to take the reins of a sheriff's office?
Well, and actually in 2008, and prior to that, the sheriff would have a lot of conversations and with me and say, I see a lot of you and me and you. And he said, I could mentor you and kind of groom you in the future to be sheriff. And then I was, in my early 30s, which is pretty young to even be thinking about that. And we had several conversations, and even one leading up to a week later, he had a heart attack and died.
Oh, my goodness.
So they had to have an emergency appointment that came down between myself and a 30-year veteran that I ultimately was chosen, and then came in, and then I was on the ballot to take over as the sheriff of Sandusky County in September of 2008 at the age of 34 years old.
Oh, my goodness. So you started in corrections and worked your way up through, and then found yourself, running for office.
I did, and at that time I was the youngest sheriff in the state of Ohio, and then currently I'm still the youngest sheriff in the county history.
Oh, my goodness! Wow. That's amazing. So through your story, what happened after that? Where did things change?
Well, during that time, everything was really good. Things took off quite well. I had a lot of good projects going on where, during that time, 2008, we had budget crunches. So I even looked outside the box. I started my own inmate jail garden, which the community came and donated all the vegetables, and I grew vegetables. And then the next year I even I had the inmates raise their own chickens there, and we utilized the vegetables and the chickens in the jail, which offset the budget. And then I have actually ended up getting the first ever Taxpayer Hero Award from then, well, it's Attorney General now, Dave Yost, who was the state. I started to do very well and took off and got a lot of accolades, even though the budget crunch. But then eventually I was diagnosed with arthritis in both of my ankles from childhood sports injuries. And so they ended up prescribing me with about 105 Vicodin, which are opioid, a month. And that's how it all began.
Oh, my goodness. My goodness. Yeah. So you then find yourself, with I guess an addiction. I mean, you
Yeah, and they put me on those around 2010, and it didn't start out that way. And then as my terms went on, I found myself in the middle of we had an individual that had a shotgun, was going to kill his family. I went in with my my SWAT team. I was a SWAT team member as well, and I'm trained in that as well. And we had to decide to go in. Through a flashbang, he turned around and pointed the gun at us, and we had to kill him, which that we didn't want to do that.
right.
The family turned on us, and I found myself with a $20 million lawsuit.
Hmm.
So I struggled with that. I got my deputies help, but I never took care of Kyle. Then some time went on. I got called out on a Sunday. Since we're up by Lake Erie, there's the Sandusky River. The mouth of the river runs into the lake there. I had 3 children fall in, and we went out to save them, and they drowned in front of us.
Oh, my gosh.
Again, I took care of my deputies, but I was too bullheaded, had too big of an ego, and to take care of Kyle. So as that time went on, I started to struggle with addiction, and I started in my mental pain instead of my physical pain with opioids.
Wow. So it just built up over time, and that initial piece with the opioids for your ankles, but then with the added pain and mental stress with the job, brought that on even more. Goodness. So how were you able to, I won't say deal with it, but then when did you decide, okay, I've got to do something about this? You're in this position, and you've got to do something about it.
Well, I didn't actually. It got so far out of control that my 105 Vicodin would only last me to probably a week and a half to 2 weeks. And I had to come up with a way to feed my addiction. So I began to doctor shop. I went between doctors and would fake, diagnosis to get, more opioids. And I did the Percocets, which are a lot stronger. And when during that time, I even with the take back boxes where they would throw away the old pills where the communities dumped that, I took it upon myself to figure out how to steal them, and I utilized them to feed my addiction as well. Any way I could get pills, I would do it. I stole from my parents. My daughter, who got her wisdom teeth pulled, stole from her. Any way I could steal, cheat, and manipulate to feed my addiction, I did it, Napoleon.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Wow. I'm sorry to hear that. So were you able to, a lot of times this impacts work life, impacts family. How did you deal with that?
Well, and during that time, of course, my first marriage was struggling as well. And then on February 3rd, 2015, I went to the pharmacy to actually pick up my prescription of Vicodin in between doctor shopping, everything. And Leslie, who's just a great woman, she was the pharmacist, and everybody knew me being the sheriff of the county. And she stopped me at the pharmacy and said, Kyle, I need to talk to you. And being the sheriff and being in law enforcement, I was in denial of my addiction. She said, you know what, you're done going between all these doctors, and I'm contacting them all, and you can no longer get narcotics from multiple doctors. And that was one of the turning points in my life, Napoleon. I was scared. I got sick. I was worried. And so I headed home that day, and I, hoping nobody would ever find out about my dirty little secret. And I flushed my last Vicodin down the toilet, and I went cold turkey to get myself clean.
Goodness, that must have been tough. I mean,
It was tough because then my wife was a school teacher. My kids would go to school. So being the sheriff, I was able to manipulate my schedule. I would pretend like I'd go to work. I'd turn around, come back, and I would hide my vehicle in the garage and pull the garage door down and go sleep for hours on end to do
hmm.
stuff.
Wow. So you were able then to go cold turkey with it, but at some point, you after working in corrections and being the sheriff, you found yourself on the other side.
I did. So, general election was coming up in 2016. My first opponent, I won by 62%. And then after that, I got a phone call, and there were some rumblings that the prosecutor got a phone call that they were going to look into me for my past drug use and possible doctor shopping. Of course, I was in total denial, and I said, I don't know what they're talking about. I think people are out to get me because they want my job. So
Mm-hmm.
I continued. I was getting ready then for, I went from the primary to the general election. I had a couple opponents. And August 23rd, 2016, I was at the Sandusky County Fair for the ribbon cutting. And by that night at 6:30, I was in an orange jumpsuit with a 43 count indictment looking at 15 years in prison.
Oh my gosh. What was going through your head at that time? I mean, you've gone through all these things and you're on the top of the world, and now all of a sudden, within a split second, you've got a yellow jumpsuit on.
Well, of course, back then, and I talk about it. My ego was big. I was in denial. It was everybody else's fault. So I kept denying everything and thinking about it, even to my wife then and my children. So I was locked up for a night, and I bonded out, and I got back out, and I continued to run for re-election again.
Wow. And did you win re-election?
Well, I continued. I marched in parades. I did quite well in debates, and even when we ran some polls, because I had a company that would do the polls, I was still ahead of everybody. And yeah, and I was still in denial, lying to everybody about my addiction. And then on November 3rd, I went to take my son to school, and I got it. Well, prior to that, he wanted a crossbow for his birthday. He was going to be 30. And so I went and purchased him a crossbow. And since I had signed on my bond, I would not have a dangerous weapon. They had followed me and found out I had purchased one. My attorney calls me and says, look, they're going to try to violate your bond. So I had a hearing on November 3rd, 2016, and I'll never forget. I was dropping my son off to school, and he says to me, Dad, will I see you after school? I said, Dylan, I got this. I got this. I was still in denial, still lying. I got this. They're out to get me, Dylan, but I'll see you after school. I went to the court that day, and I was found that I had violated my bond. Then they put a $250,000 cash bond on me, no 10%, nothing. There was no way out.
Wow.
So they sent me to Marion County Jail, and I sat there, and that's where I started to surrender and talk about my addiction and move forward. So I started to make some phone calls to my parents. Didn't say much to my wife then and my kids. I confided in my parents, especially my mother, who talked to me every day and every step of the way, and she still does.
Yeah.
I even went to my first AA meeting there, my first, self-help meeting. And
Right.
so I began to write letters to the judge, the prosecutor, many, constituents and colleagues to let them know what was going on. And then I made a plea deal pled to 12 felony counts. And I was taken December 13th, 2016 in front of the judge to be sentenced, and hoping, I was going to get probation and get treatment. I was physically not using narcotics anymore, but mentally I was still struggling, as a lot of people do in the disease of addiction. So I went in front of the judge then, and she says, Mr. Overmyer, what do you think you deserve? And I said, I'm an addict. I need help. I need treatment, and I'm sorry. And it was a packed house there. I mean, any media you could think of. They even had a camera on my residence to see what was going on at my residence live at that day, to tell you the truth. And
Wow.
she said, Mr. Overmyer, I'm going to give you the best treatment in the state of Ohio. I'm going to give you 4 years in prison.
Wow. Wow. What's running through your head right then?
Oh my gosh, I don't
Mm.
know what to do. I thought that my whole world was taken away from me at that time, Napoleon.
Mm.
But as we find out, and we'll go in the story, it didn't. It wasn't.
Wow. Wow. So let me ask you this, because people often, ask us about someone, especially who's been in law enforcement, going into prison.
Yes.
How are you received there?
Well, my first 30 days, I was in solitary confinement. I was in the hole. That was I thought was a tough time, but it was the best time for me. Of course, you're in there by yourself. It's dark. You have nothing in there. There's no clock. The only time when it's time to eat, I would hear the wheels turn on the concrete floor, which would trigger me to say, okay, they're bringing food to me. So it was time for me to figure out who Kyle Overmyer was and was going to be, and who he needed to be. And I was either going to go one way or the other. And I decided to go the right way. So it was a lot of taking time for me and my higher power at that time to figure out a plan, what to do in these 4 years. And 4 years is a long time, Napoleon.
Yeah. So during this time of 4 years that you were in there, you're making this plan, but the solitary confinement really gave you that opportunity for, I guess, quietness or whatever to really come up with that plan.
Yes, and the way I look at it, I think that isolation creates elevation in your mind, and it elevated my mind more than ever after being 40 plus years old to be incarcerated, and it took being in there by yourself to elevate your mind. So and then I didn't think it was the best time, but it was the best time for me.
Okay, good.
From there, they took me because of my position, they took me to protective custody, to be segregated from other people that had high profile cases, and that they were worried about would have retaliation. Well, due to the movement, it was very controlled movement, and there wasn't much freedom, and I was going to be there 4 years. I signed out and went to general population with everybody.
Wow.
So I didn't serve much time in protective custody, and that was on me. And they told me if I signed off, I couldn't come back. They were worried, and I said, "Don't worry about me. I got this. I can handle this. I got to do this."
Yeah. So was that? And looking back, was that the smart move for you to do?
It was the best move for me, Napoleon.
Okay.
I mean, I did get into one altercation. I handled it. You get tried in there. I handled it. And that night they came, and him and his boys came over and said, "We don't want no more problems from you." They respected me in there.
Okay.
I could self. They didn't realize that I could handle myself. So I did.
Very good. Very good. So you've turned this into then, what I understand is KO addictions.
Correct.
How did that start? Well, tell us a little bit about KO addictions. What is it all about?
Well, it all started. I served my 4 years, actually, April 6th, 2020. So I've been out a total of 3 years. I got out. I was homeless, to tell you the truth. I was homeless, and I had to flop on. I was on parole, and I had to flop on a woman that I knew's spare bedroom on an air mattress. I had nothing. I had 6 garbage bags full of old clothes. Starting over. I went through bankruptcy. I went through a divorce, and I didn't see my kids for 4 years. So build, and nobody would employ me, Napoleon. But what I did, I was friends with the owner of Least Famous Recipe Chicken. Actually, best chicken spot around. I love it.
I agree.
Um,
Just had it just last week. Or
oh,
2
did
weeks.
you? Okay.
Yes, yes.
So I got a job making $9.50 an hour frying chicken in my own hometown. And it was interesting because a lot of the people that I worked with and that, because a lot of the people, the who's who would come in there to eat from Fremont, where I'm from, and they would take pictures of me and put memes on Facebook, make fun of me and try to tear me down. But honestly, Napoleon, it did the opposite. It turned me up.
Hmm.
And I started doing a lot of meetings. I started sharing my story on Facebook, and I was broke. I had nothing. And then somebody I met at one of the meetings gave me a chance to work in the addiction and mental health field. I worked as a behavioral tech on a midnight shift, and I started to share my story, which then brought myself to my current wife and my current and forever wife, actually, Jennifer. I met her November 22nd, 2020, and we got married 6 weeks later. Crazy.
Wow. Love that. Yeah.
So we talked about the story, and one day I came home from work, and she says, you sharing your story, you should get around travel more, and you could call your organization KO Addiction. My name's Kyle Overmyer. I was a boxer and knockout addiction.
Yes.
So we put that together, and actually when we got married, she lived in the Columbus area and I was in Fremont. I finally got an apartment, and I actually got an apartment in the hood where I used to kick doors, and that's all I could afford. So 6 days later, I think it's a God thing. I'm not here to preach about, you know, who to believe in. 6 days later, I get a phone call from a man that owned a facility in Florida and says, "Hey, I see your story. I'd love to hire you in business development. I think you'd be a great fit." And it was in Columbus. So I come to Columbus. I'm with my wife. I go through and get out there, and I start sharing my story with a lot of organizations, traveling. I've even recently traveled to Cape Cod. They flew me into Cape Cod to speak. And then here I am today, still sharing it. And then I'm the regional director with Hickory Behavioral Hospital, where we're going to open a behavioral hospital in Cambridge, Ohio.
Wow. Wow. That's a crazy good story. And what I just, I hear through, through your career and through, I guess, your life it's like, it's one of service, right? Whether it's in the sheriff's office and all, then also, and even when you're younger in sports and what have you, but now getting out and helping others. And that's truly commendable, but also just to be the resiliency of being able to go from the highest highs to the lowest lows and still inspire others.
Well, and I thought it would be a disservice to everyone, including my kids, not to utilize my experiences for the right things in life. There's a very high recidivism rate when it comes to people that are incarcerated, and I don't want to be one of those people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to leave behind a legacy, not a liability for my children and my family. So, and I've even taken it a step further now. I've partnered with a co-author out of California and writing a book that's going to come out by the end of this year to not only tell my story, but also help people that are not in a recovery. That, you know what, a lot of people take the easy way out in life, Napoleon, and they give up. It's easier to give up than turn it up. And I think we sell ourselves very short with what kind of qualities and empowerment we truly have within inside. We have so much more than we realize, but we just don't believe in ourselves. And if we don't believe in ourselves, nobody else will.
Yeah, very true. Very true. I love what you just said. Legacy, not a liability, and in a sense, don't give up, turn it up. Right.
That's right. And I do every day, 7 days a week.
Yeah. Well, I love your story. And now how can, people get this? Because you say you go out and get some talks and what have you and inspire others. How can somebody get a hold of you if they want to, hear your story or have you come out or whatever? How do they get a hold of you?
Well, they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on there. I'm on Facebook, as you well know, or they can call me 419-455-0793. It's my personal number. I answer return phone calls. I'm good about it. You know that, Napoleon. I'll call you back right away.
Yes.
Or you can actually email me at kovermeyer6@gmail.com. And the ironic thing is that is the email I set up when I was at the end of my prison bit. So I still kept that as well.
Oh, all right.
I don't change much about myself. And ironically, I still wear the same Timberland boots I used to walk in the yard in prison. I wear those to remind me where I used to be and where I don't want to go back to.
I hear you. I hear you. No, that's something. I mean, that's a heck of a story. I really appreciate you sharing that with me, and then also those who are hearing the story. And hopefully what you have gone through will inspire others to not give up, and to turn it up. So appreciate your time, Kyle, and keep the KO addiction going. Because I wasn't even thinking about Kyle Overmyer. I was thinking about knockout.
Right. And that's what people called me growing up, KO. So, and it kind of carried over.
Yeah. Love it. Well, stay around. I'm gonna be right back to you, but I appreciate though you coming on and speaking with us, and keep on pushing, keep on inspiring others to do what they think they cannot do.
Absolutely. I appreciate having me on today, Napoleon.
All right. Take care now. Wow, that was Kyle Overmyer. What an amazing story, an inspirational story. One that when you think you can't go further, that you just push that a little harder, that you don't give up, but you tear it up. And remember, you want to leave be a legacy and not a liability. So those are words to remember. Thank you so much, Kyle, for your time. And thank you for watching What's My Story. And if you know someone who has an amazing story or just an ordinary person doing extraordinary things in the community, please let me know. I would love to interview them and love to expose them to all of you. Have a great week and take care.